So it's me again. We just finished up for this chapter 5, 6 screencasts with the Fusiform Space Center and talking about that. So let's see what we got next. I'm always talking about stress, so I did want to put this in here. If too many stress hormones are produced in infants, the brain will not be able to have normal stress responses. Occurs in infants who are terrified and experience other forms of stress. Can continue to occur when the infant is an adult. They can either become overreactive or emotionally flat. So let me just speak to that. Just like anything that's firing and wiring, a big part, and we're going to do so much of this in chapter 7 that I'm not going to spend a lot of time here, but part of what's firing and wiring is going to be their emotional centers and their coping mechanisms around stress and just, an infant stress, and we'll talk about that, can be anything from just not being picked up when they want to be to trauma. So all of this is impacting in that firing and wiring through their experience. It's firing, it's connecting these parts of I have to figure out sometimes. Anyway, these parts of the brain, like the emotional centers, with the prefrontal cortex. The prefrontal cortex helps to inhibit emotional responses. And so the more connections there are between these two parts of the brain, the greater our ability to self-regulate and to regulate our emotions and control them, handle them, manage them, be aware of them. So this is all happening too. Too much stress, too many stress hormones, cortisol that just dumps into baby way too early, can impact the sort of manufacturing of these structures and the ability of the infant later in life to be able to manage and control these things. They can either become sort of you can have a hyper stress response. So if you think about it like that car alarm, it can kind of, in this early stage, we can build a car alarm that's way sensitive, like you just sort of walk by it and it goes off. Or a stress response that you can like shove against it and it just never goes off. Almost a broken stress response completely. So one that's almost working too well and one that doesn't work at all. So that can be the person who's like hyper reactive to stress or completely affectively flat. So there's a lot that can go on in this time period as far as stress is concerned. So whether you're online or ground, if you want to watch this little video which talks about toxic stress in children, you can do that. It's very short. Okay, the next thing I'm going to cover in this chapter 5 area is sleep. Because I'm going to cover sleep a little bit more than it does in the book. One thing I find really interesting to keep in mind, we wonder, why do babies not sleep when they're supposed to sleep? Well, our circadian rhythms control our kind of sleep-wake cycle, and those are regulated by light-dark cycles, so by night and dark. That's why people who have to work all night and sleep all day, it can be difficult when you're trying to train the body into doing that. People that live in places that it's 24 hours of light or 24 hours of dark at certain times of the year have to train the body and find ways to sort of trick the body into believing it's light or dark. It takes time, though. So if you think about in the womb, a newborn didn't have this. They might see shadows of gray as compared to dark, but there's no light dark. There's no circadian rhythms really happening for in vitro. So when they come out, it takes a while for these circadian rhythms to come online. So this results in these irregular sleep cycles. An average newborn, 15 to 17 hours, if you're lucky. Not all, again, norms. By age 2, supposedly, not mine. If you'll notice a lot of times when I'm talking about these norms, my child was so not a norm baby that you'll hear me laugh. Ample sleep correlates with normal brain maturation, learning, emotional maturation. So we're going to talk about what that all means. But first, let's look at the different sleep cycles. We have that stage 1, kind of that twilighty period between awake and sleep. Stage 2, we're going to sleep. The body temperature begins to drop. Stage 3 and 4, blood pressure drops, breathing slows, muscles relax. So this is our deep sleep, this stage 3 and 4. These are our real deep sleep. And during this time, tissue growth and repair happens. Blood to the muscles increase, and that helps with that tissue growth and repair. So this is a reason why sleep is really important. There's a lot that's going on. Growth hormone is released. That's why it's really important for children too. If they're not getting adequate sleep, they don't get an opportunity for these sort of building mechanisms that need to happen. REM occurs every 90 minutes in adults, 20% of the time for adults. So adults are on like a 90-minute cycle. Baby sleep cycle is about 50 minutes. And they spend about 50% in REM and non-REM. And everything other than REM is non-REM. By 6 months, they're in non-REM about 70. By preschool, they're at about where we are with that 90-minute cycles. So we go through these cycles over and over again through the night. And, baby does too. So we're all kind of waking up. It's like you can imagine it as diving deep down into the ocean and then coming back up, diving deep down, coming back up. We ride that wave many times through the night if we're doing it well. But there's a bit of an epidemic of sleep deprivation among, I think, all people, especially teenagers, young adults these days. So non-REM sleep is quiet, deep, or slow wave sleep. It starts to increase around 3 to 4 months. Another reason, is baby may not be the best sleeper in the beginning there. Maybe not until they're 4 years old for some of us. Increases blood supply to muscles, tissues, growth, and repair. So release of growth hormone in children and young adults. Cells show increased production and reduced breakdown of proteins. Since proteins are the building blocks needed for cell growth and for repair of damage from factors like stress, ultraviolet rays, deep sleep may truly be beauty sleep. So we're getting cell production is growing, but breakdown is reducing. So this is an opportunity for the body to replenish itself. Activity in parts of the brain that control emotions, decision-making processes, social interactions drastically reduced during deep sleep, suggesting that this type of sleep may help people maintain optimal emotional and social functioning while they are awake. So sleep is a time for encoding memories, for taking all that's come in during the day and kind of processing and coding it. But it gives the brain sort of a break from some of the decision making and, all of the things that from feeling and sensing those emotions. So it's taking them in. They're becoming part of memories and coding into them. But they're not working so hard and kind of letting us rest, especially during this time. We're not dreaming during this time. It's a real quiet time. And then we have REM sleep. So infants spend much more time in REM than adults. The pons, which is in the brain stem, sends signals to the thalamus. The thalamus is like a relay station for the senses, for everything that's coming into the brain. It kind of comes in through the thalamus, and then it sort of from there goes out to where it needs to be. Sends them to the cortex. The pons also sends signals that shut off neurons in the spinal cord, causing temporary paralysis of the limb muscles. If something interferes with the paralysis, people will begin to physically act out their dreams. I'll talk about that in a minute. Stimulates brain regions used in learning, increased production of proteins. And people taught a skill and then deprived of non-REM sleep could recall what they had learned, while people deprived of REM sleep could not. So again, they're finding that both in REM and non-REM, though, memories are being encoded, learning is being encoded. And so sometimes when somebody says, I've been studying, I just can't remember, and we say sleep on it, that might be a really good idea, because a lot of what's brought in during the day is encoded and really registered at night during sleep. And if we don't get that sleep, that's why our memory can start to we can't remember what we're doing in a room we walk into sometimes if we're really sleep deprived. We can't remember our names, much else. Dreams, some believe, are the brain's attempt to find meaning in the random signals that it receives during REM sleep. So all the stuff that comes in through the thalamus and all of this information that's coming in, all the sensory information and everything that we've realized and not even realized that's come in anyway, trying to make some type of sense of all these random things that have happened. Also, there's the idea that trying to process through some of those emotions, attaching them to memories, all of these images through the day showing up and then winding around other random images or feelings or emotions or memories. The cortex is the part of the brain that interprets and organizes information. It may be that given random signals from the pons during REM sleep, the cortex tries to interpret those signals as well, creating a story out of fragmented brain activity. So there may just be all of these different things and the brain is trying to sort it out. There's a lot of different theories around dreams. That's just another one for you. So people sometimes ask then, well, what about this in sleep? What about that? So talking in sleep, somniloquy, so if you think, it can happen during any of those stages, actually. More gibberish, the deeper the sleep. So it may just be like mumbling things that can't be worked out if we're in really deep sleep. The more if we're in REM sleep or coming out of sleep, it may have more clarity, greater clarity, be part of the story that we're dreaming, who knows. More often males and children. Sleep deprivation, alcohol, drugs, stress can also create more potential for this. You can look up that if you're interested in that topic more. Sleepwalking, somnambulism, most often during non-REM sleep, because if you remember during REM sleep, there's that paralysis that takes place. The pons shuts off neurons in the spinal cord. So unless there's a problem, a disorder for sleep, then this most often happens in non-REM sleep, actually, even though we seem to be really deep in sleep. That's why we don't remember it. We most often in children ages 5 through 12 seems to run in families. I've seen that. My brother did some sleepwalking. My son does a lot of sleep talking, as does my husband. So those are a couple of things and when they might happen. REM behavior disorder is, again, that time when we act out dreams. Might even hit, walk, might even go make yourself a sandwich, do things that you would do during the day. And my poor sister-in-law got punched in the eye when my brother was dreaming about being in a fight. And he's not a fighter. I don't know where this came from, but he was dreaming about being in a fight, and she tried to wake him, and he punched her. He was not awake. He did not see it. But that's why you have to be really careful with people who are doing this. You don't mess with them. As with disorders like narcolepsy, where we fall asleep just at any moment, distinctions, they believe that maybe what happens is that distinctions between these different sleep states sort of breaks down and they begin to sort of invade upon one another. And so they don't act the way they're supposed to, but they get qualities of other sleep states. So co-sleeping, just something that comes up in the chapter, the custom of parents and children sleeping in the same room. We find this in more sort of interdependent cultures. So we're going to talk a lot about cultures in this class because it has a lot to do with how we see things. So I would say, there are certain cultures that just sort of a very big generalization, and I realize that. But in the West, seen as very independent, we strive for that independence and we can do it ourselves, and it's that pioneering kind of American spirit. But there are cultures that are more interdependent. I would say Asia, Africa, Latin America, these are more interdependent, where it's, family or community first, not individual first. Pros and cons, whatever. I'm not talking pros and cons or judgments on that, but it's important to understand that a lot of times we have to be aware of the values of a culture to understand how they understand and what they do with these different traditions. And sleeping is one of them. It's becoming more popular in Western cultures, though. So you can think about for a minute what your experience was with co-sleeping. If you have children, or when you were a child, did you do it? Did you sleep with mom and dad? Would you let your kids sleep with you? And if you wouldn't, are you afraid of that sort of them becoming dependent quality? And if you would, is it because you value that interdependence? So that last word was interdependence. I had to do a little editing there. So, keeping in mind that there are going to be ethnic or cultural variations in values, and therefore in patterns for child rearing, choices for child rearing, how we, what we consider important or not, what we punish or reward. And so all of that goes, into this, sleeping being one. It said that one South African tribe, the Kung, breastfeed, up to 50 to 100 times a day, several, like quick ones, several times an hour, that they're very big on, keeping the baby close. There was a psychologist who we'll talk about a little bit later, James W. Prescott, who studied violence and sort of this closeness of children, like how much affection, physical affection was given to children, how much closeness, how much of this feeding and, and all of this kind of holding and stuff, did it correlate with violence in societies. And there was somewhat of a correlation between those who had a lot of close, very close affect, very holding of children and so forth, and less violence. Not in all the cultures did they see it, but across the board that seemed to be something that was found. So I'm going to stop this for now and come back to do some more later. See ya.